everyone, and we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special historians interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And joining me today is a guest from the past. Now, if you've been following my journey with podcasting from the beginning, you may recognize this guest. She is an incredible person, a talented artist, and if you know her work, she has done a lot of work in the historical community for reenactment. She has portrayed numerous and very, very powerful characters in the historical community, one of which is the unsinkable Molly Brown, and many more. And she is just a delight to have. And it's been a long time since we've had her on the show, but she is finally here making her return to the show once more. So without further ado, let us welcome a returning guest from the Encore years, historian and historical reenactor, JoAnn Peterson. JoAnn, welcome back to the show.
Hi, very nice to be here. Just want to let you know it's raining here and I have a skylight, so you may hear a little bit of noise in the background.
No problem, JoAnn, no problem. It is so nice to have you back on the show. Now, as a refresher for our viewers and listeners, what can you tell us since the last time you were on the podcast side, which I want to say was 2-3 years ago? What has changed?
It's been a while. I can't even remember who I was portraying then. I currently portray 7 women of history that I've researched, and I'm researching 2 more right now. I know I wasn't portraying Frances Perkins then. Frances Perkins, in case your viewers don't know who she was the very first female cabinet member. She was on FDR's cabinet. She served as Secretary of Labor longer than any other Secretary of Labor. In fact, the building, the Department of Labor building, is named the Frances Perkins Building. But I've been spending a fair amount of time researching her. I had become good friends with her grandson, who answered so many questions, was encouraging. And I went for an audition to portray her for the West Virginia Humanities Council History Alive program. So I called Tomlin and I said, Tomlin, I'm on my way. He says, well, let me know how it goes. I mean, he was just such a delight, a person that wanted to tell me everything about her. He passed away in January. So I will be going to his memorial service up at the Frances Perkins Center in Newcastle, Maine, later on this month. But he invited me to Ithaca, New York, where they unveiled a statue of Frances, and then to Cornell University, which is in Ithaca. That was last year. And I got to go into Frances's room. She lived there the last 5 years of her life. She taught at Cornell the last 10 years of her life. I got to change in her room and do a portrayal in front of students who are now octogenarians, but they were students when Frances lived there. Got one of the best reviews of my whole life. Her grandson was in the audience as well. So that was pretty amazing. And I also got to do another amazing thing. The White House Historical Association started a new museum in Washington, D.C. It's called the People's House, and it is fantastic. It's an interactive museum, so kids would absolutely love it. But I was filmed as both Frances Perkins for the FDR's cabinet. They're in the cabinet room. There are 3 scenarios that they have: Abraham Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, and FDR, and the problems that they are encountering as they go into office. And each of their cabinet members gets to give their advice. So I was Frances Perkins for that, the only female in all 3 of those cabinets. I was also filmed as Mary Lincoln. So when they had their grand opening, that was last August, I believe, I was hired to come and portray Mary Lincoln for that. We had Dennis Boggs as Abraham Lincoln, Bill Barker, I think his name's Thomas Jefferson. We had an FDR and a Teddy Roosevelt. I'm sorry, I don't have those names in front of me, who they were. But we got to be there when they invited in, and these were all invitees to the grand opening. So I got to chat with Martin Sheen. That was
Nice.
pretty cool. Um, yeah, it was really neat to be part, not just portraying a person from history, but actually becoming part of history. The grand opening of a brand new museum in Washington. So that was amazing too.
That's incredible, JoAnn, and
Yeah.
absolutely wonderful to hear. And it also reminds you of like our very first discussions, like many years ago, when you told me about your journey as portraying these incredible women in history. And if I'm not mistaken, at the time you were portraying sequel. Well, you've done the sequel Molly Brown, and I think you were also portraying, if I'm not mistaken, Shirley Temple or another famous, either Shirley Temple,
You're
Audrey
right,
Hepburn,
Shirley
or
Temple Black. Yeah,
yes,
I
Shirley
portray
Temple
her
Black.
I portray her as a Shirley Temple Black, not as Shirley Temple, the little girl. I
Right.
portray her as the ambassador to Prague, to Czechoslovakia at that time. And I've done a portrayal of Shirley at the U.S. Embassy in Prague with people in the audience who knew her, as well as in California for a group called Shirley Temple Collectors by the Sea, again, with people in the audience who knew her. To do a portrayal of someone with people in the audience who actually knew that, like Francis Perkins' grandson and
Mm-hmm.
students who had known her, that's the scariest thing. But it's
Mm,
also the most rewarding when you get the feedback saying we felt like we were we were there among Frances again, that she was talking to us as she did nightly. Yeah, that's amazing to have that kind of feedback from people. Hmm.
awesome. That is really, really cool, JoAnn. Now, just as a refresher for our new listeners who are just now meeting you for the first time, JoAnn, um, can you give us just a brief overview of how you went down this path of historical reenactment and when you made the decision to really commit to this, the passion behind it, as well as looking back on how different your life could have been if you'd not pursued this path.
Well, I don't really call myself a reenactor.
Okay.
A reenactor usually attends like a Civil War weekend. They dress
Mm,
up, they camp out, and they may be a particular person that they have studied. But what I do is called a Chautauqua portrayal. So
okay.
it's on stage.
Mm,
I write my own monologues. So I do a half hour to a 45-minute first person monologue. I'm totally in character. And then I take questions from the audience as the historical figure. Then I
okay.
break character and I take questions as the researcher. So it's more of an interpretation of that person's life, of them, becoming them, putting
Mm,
flesh to their bones, making them come alive again in a way that's educational as well as entertaining. So
nice.
when I
Very, very
say
nice.
I've done portrayals, that's what I'm meaning.
Ah,
Not that other than now when I was hired by the White House Historical
right.
Association for the grand opening, I was in character the whole time there. It
Mm,
was not a staged program. So I do that too, but that's not normally what I do.
okay.
Yes.
Well,
Okay. And
thank you for.
I'm a professional actor as well as a historian. So I've been in films. In fact, I filmed as Mercy Otis Warren,
Mm,
who is called The Muse of the American Revolution. It was David Garrigous Productions. The film is just now coming out. I'm not in the
ooh,
film. It's called The American Constitution. He's taking it around different venues and it will be in the schools. I think it's going to be on PBS maybe. But once the movie releases, then there's going to be a mini series that follows that. And I will be in the
okay.
mini series as Mercy Otis Warren. I had read some about Mercy when I did the role, but I didn't really know that much about her. So I've since started learning more. She was the one that wrote the first accounts of the American Revolution, 3 volumes. I think it's 3 volumes. It's pretty lengthy, and
Wow.
I've read it all. And she also was a playwright, satirical plays and poems that made fun of the British and of the king and Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Abigail Adams, who I also portray,
Right.
were friends of hers, and she gave them a lot of advice. When I go to Maine in a couple of weeks to Tomlin's memorial service, I'm actually making a couple weeks of it. And
Nice.
I'm going up to FDR's Hyde Park and seeing things about
Mhm.
Francis there, what I can learn about that, because yes, she visited there, she stayed there. When he was governor of New York, she worked under him over his, basically, she was his Secretary of Labor.
Mm.
That's not what the title was, but that's what she did. So she often went to his home for different things. And I've been to his home in New York City, where he offered her that job as Secretary of Labor for the
Right.
whole United States. So I've actually been there and stood in that spot where she did when she accepted that. So I spent a lot of time in research. But then we're going to go to Grant's home.
Mm.
My husband portrays U.S. Grant, and we're going to Hildene, which is Robert Lincoln's home. Abraham Lincoln and Mary Lincoln's son, the only one that survived her.
Mm.
And then we're going to the funeral service and to Francis Perkins Center, where I've not been to yet, and to Francis's grave, which is also in Newcastle. From there, we're going to Quincy, and I'll do some more Abigail Adams research.
Mhm.
Jenny Lind was married in Boston. I'm going to find out where that spot was. I'm going to all the homes where Adams lived there. Uh, Francis Perkins was born there. And then Barnstable, where Mercy Otis Warren was born, Plymouth, where she lived, Lexington and Concord to see more things about the American Revolution. And then I'll go to Worcester, where Frances Perkins grew up, and then to Mount Holyoke, the college that she attended. So I'm making a whole loop of it. I think I've said something about everybody that that I plan to see while I'm away.
Awesome. Well, you are going to be very, very busy, JoAnn,
Yeah.
and rightly so. And I've had the opportunity to scour around the interwebs and look at some of your performances that were recorded either from people in the audience and just listening to it. You put a lot of heart and soul into all the characters
I
you
love
portray.
them. I do. I feel like they're my friends, and I truly love them. Someone asked me, they wanted me to portray Lizzie Borden or somebody like that, and I said, no, I cannot portray someone I don't like, someone I wouldn't want to have over for tea. It's got to be someone that is uplifting and inspiring. And every one of these women that I portray are very uplifting and very inspiring. Shirley Temple Black, some people credit her for helping us get through the Great Depression. Of course,
Right.
I credit Frances also in getting us things that continued beyond the Great Depression. Because of her, we have Social Security, unemployment insurance, the child
Mhm.
labor laws, workmen's compensation, and these are things most people don't know about how she tried to get refugees, the Jews, out of Germany, and the children. That's just coming to light now, but just incredible, incredible people. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, JoAnn, whenever you are researching a new character to perform on stage, there's a two-part question. What are sort of the goals you have, as the performer to show the authenticity of the individual while also understanding your audience? And the reason I bring that up is that, like historians, authors, and everything, we want to showcase our individuality and how we either write about history, perform history, and so forth. But on the other side, we have to understand, okay, I'm portraying this character or I'm writing about this topic. I have to be mindful that some people may know who this person is or know this era, some may not. So it's a balancing act. So for you, how do you approach it whenever you are researching a new character to perform as?
I try to be true to the character, showing their flaws as well as their good points.
Mm.
Mary Lincoln point, especially, I get this because she's received such a bad rap through history.
Right.
William Herndon, who was her husband's final law partner, did not like her at all. So he wrote some awful things about her, which weren't true, which
Mm,
other than authors have written the same thing because they figured, well, he knows he was Lincoln's law partner, not realizing he had such a bias. So you have to look at the authors and do they have a bias? And
right.
it and also like Shirley Temple Black, when you read her autobiography, realize it's coming from Shirley's point of view.
Right.
She honestly believed that she was going to be Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz because that's
Mm,
what she had been told. But the truth was, well, there was a deal between MGM and Fox, and it fell through when Jean Harlow died, who was supposed to be Clark Gable and Jean Harlow were supposed to be swapped out for Shirley Temple. That's what she was told. But actually, there were some scouts that came and heard Shirley sing and realized she couldn't cut it, that Judy Garland was a much better singer than she would ever have been. So even autobiographies you can't always go by to get to the
mm,
facts. I try to adapt my portrayals for my audience too.
mm.
When I did my portrayal in California, Shirley, it was supposed to be about Walt Disney, her connection with Walt Disney. So
Ah,
I
okay.
emphasize that part of it. I often go into schools. So when I go into schools, I was Mary Lincoln a couple of weeks ago in a Hindu school. No, I'm sorry, Muslim school, and in North Carolina. And I had one of the boys come up and pretend he was dancing with me because when Lincoln first met, this is the family lore, when he first met Mary Lincoln was at a cotillion, a dance, and he walked up to her
Right.
and said, "I would like to dance with you in the worst way." And he did, as she says,
Yes.
which I do it in a different accent, and that's one of the things too. I try to find out if there was something different about them, and she spoke with a Kentucky twang, so I try to do that. Jenny
Mm,
Lind, obviously a Swedish accent, and I had a vocal a coach to work with me when I played the role of Jenny Lind in Barnum the Musical. Um, Nellie Bly often went up on the ends of her sentences. She was lived not too far from me in Pennsylvania, so she probably talked a lot like I do, the same way. But each one of them talked a little bit different. The only ones we have recordings of that I portray are Shirley Temple Black and Frances Perkins. There are no
mm.
recordings other than photos. No audio, no video of any of the other ones. So I can't know exactly how Abigail Adams taught, but she was a British citizen living in Massachusetts, so she probably had a mashup between a British and a New England dialect that we think of now. So those are the kind of things, like I said, to try to make them authentic, to make them real. By studying so much about them, reading about them, you have to You have to do that because when you start getting the questions, you have to be inside their head to answer how you believe that they would answer. There are some times when I'm asked questions that I've not found anything in my research about,
Mm.
but you still have to come back in character. That's when you're in character and explain that. There have been times I've broken character later then and came back to them and said, "I'm sorry, but I don't know the exact answer to that question." Like I was asked one time as Mary Lincoln, which of the two vice presidents' wives did you like better? Well, she really wasn't around that much. The second one, she had been sick a lot. So you just have to have educated guests sometimes to answer the questions, but they are
Right.
educated. Hmm.
That is very true. And that just comes with understanding, your audience and, how you portray history. Because, as I mentioned before, it's the same as writing history because you have to understand your audience and how well they understand the source material. And of course, some people, again, may not know more about, the women that you portray or maybe some aspects. So, it does leave one's interpretation like how do I fill in the gaps as best as possible, or it's not diluting their integrity as individuals, their autonomy, but I'm still getting the point across. And I'm also very curious, JoAnn, when you began this journey as a performer, as an actor, portraying these incredible women, Did you ever have moments of heightened anxiety and imposter syndrome in the sense that, oh, people are going to see right through me, that I'm, shoehorning this performance in? And if you did, or if you didn't, what has disciplined you to continue down this path of bringing these women and possibly more in the future to life?
Oh gosh, you ask a lot of oh gosh, a lot of parts to that. Um, Imposter syndrome. I think every actor is an imposter in a way, but you're
Mm,
living the truth in fictitious circumstances.
right.
So in my mind, I am that person, even though I'm not. Because I have studied them so much, I feel like I am embodying them. I'm channeling every time before I go out for portrayal. I say, Dear Lord, please let me bring honor and truth to this woman, that
Mm,
people can see how amazing she was and be encouraged by her life. Every single one of these women had to overcome obstacles. They were, like I said, they're uplifting, they're inspirational, they're great role models for kids. And I feel honored, absolutely honored, to be continuing their legacy or to be bringing them to new audiences, children, adults, seniors, whoever, who have never heard of them or know a little bit, but they might not know the truth about them, just what they've heard. And so you are honoring these women as well as enlightening and educating in an entertaining way.
absolutely. And also, to something that you mentioned earlier is, of course, working with like minded people who are also passionate about bringing these people to life or bringing an aspect of that person to life. So, I am curious, in your career, have you ever, uh, how should I phrase this correctly? So, in your career as both an actor and a stage performer, how important was it to, at the time, I don't know if they did it now, but like to network, to work with other people who were also passionate about, the craft of bringing these people to life? And as a fun question, what was probably the best, I'm going to use the word duet. So you and another actor portraying historical characters in front of an audience. Do you have a particular moment, a favorite moment you'd like to share?
I'll answer the last one first. I act solo.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so I've not done a historical portrayal with another person. I
All right.
have been with Fritz Klein, who portrays Abraham Lincoln in just meeting and greeting people, or with Dennis Boggs down at the People's House, those
Okay.
kind of things. So it's always a solo.
Mm,
But I belong to the Association of Lincoln Presenters. I also belong to a group called Mary's Coterie, Mary Lincoln's Coterie. And these
mm,
are a group of mainly women who portray Mary or Mary Harlan Lincoln or some people that do Robert Lincoln, whatever, mainly Mary Lincolns. Donna McCreary is one of those ladies who has become a friend of mine, and Donna has written several books about Mary Lincoln. So when I have a question about Mary, like costuming or whatever, I contact Donna, and she's very helpful. So they are very supportive of each other and encouraging of each other too. I've been on the West Virginia Humanities Council History Alive roster for
mm.
18 years now. I started out with
Wow.
Jenny Lind and then Mary Lincoln, Nellie Bly, Abigail Adams, and Frances Perkins. Of the seven women I
Mm,
portray, five of them have been with the West Virginia Humanities Council. There are 13 or 14 characters usually on there, but several of us portray more than one. So, networking with them, yes. I'm also a teaching artist with the Maryland State Arts Council. I'm sorry,
nice.
I'm a touring artist with the Maryland State Arts Council. I'm an artist in schools with the Wake County in North Carolina schools where my son Michael lives.
Mm,
So you get to know some other people through that. Through my acting, I that's opened up doors to be able to do some portrayals too. I go into a lot of museums, a lot of schools, libraries, historical societies. I've now been doing senior communities. So I've performed at the Villages for 5 years. That's the largest retirement community in the
Mm,
United States. It's in Florida. I'll be going back again next year. So the bad thing that if I have to say anything bad today, the West Virginia Humanities Council has lost half their funding because the National Endowment for the Humanities is basically being shut down by Doge. They
mm.
fired 80% of the people with 20% left to shut it down. Half the funding Humanities Council receives comes through the National Endowment for the Humanities. So we have been told we cannot take any more bookings. This is heartbreaking to know that there's school children, there's community members who are not going to be taking advantage not just of History Alive, but of the grants that are given to their libraries to put on programs, to museums to do research, etc. Yeah, so that's a sad thing.
That is very tragic to hear, JoAnn. That is very, very, unfortunate. And, that brings up another topic that I've shared with a lot of guests on the show is that, humanities and, field of history in particular, it's now more than ever, it just needs to be, protected and taught more in any capacity, whether that's, presentations, performances. And it is, again, I'm very unfortunate that, as time has gone on, it's like this weird conundrum where people are interested in history, but they're not interested in learning about history or sharing history or preserving history. It's really, really weird, this weird conundrum, and that could be a whole episode in and of itself. But
Mm-hmm.
then, of course, you do find the other side. You do have people who are still passionate and will fight to, preserve history and keep it alive in some shape or form. And then, of course, that comes with networking and people and just meeting again like-minded individuals
Mm-hmm.
who are passionate about the craft. Now, as a fun question, JoAnn, I've always wanted to ask you this. Actually, this actually was a fan question originally from 2 years ago, which I didn't ask you. But in your career, has there been one woman that you always wanted to portray, but you knew either A, there was not a lot of research on that person, or B, her accent or her speech pattern was maybe too difficult to study?
Ooh. Well, Mercy Otis Warren, the one I'm starting on now, there's
Mhm.
not a whole lot about her. There is
Mm,
some, and I think enough to do a good portrayal of her. Um, Nancy Hanks, the mother of Abraham Lincoln, we don't even know for sure who she was. I
right.
grew up in Mineral County, West Virginia, and there's a Nancy Hanks birthplace, which I always was told this is the birthplace of Abraham Lincoln's mother.
Mhm.
Well, when I was doing my research out at the Lincoln Library in Springfield, I found out they're not sure that's the right one. So yeah, to do the mother of course, she died at a young age.
Mm,
Um, Amelia Earhart, because I'm too old to do that too, she died at a young age. So
right.
there's certain reasons I don't do certain ones. Dolly Madison was tall. I'm not. I'm short, so I
Right.
don't do her. So there are physical limitations.
Mm,
I try to portray someone who has a body type or size similar to me. Eye color, I've got brown contacts when I do Shirley Temple Black,
right,
so
right.
you can change those kind of things. Yeah.
Okay, nice. As a follow-up to that, and this one, I don't know if anyone has ever approached you of that, either in your inner circle or the privately, but have you ever considered possibly doing audio narrations? Let's say someone wanted to hire your services to portray a character, but as opposed to dressing up and acting it on stage, you are just, performing the character through your voice, whether you're doing a narration or, someone's reading the book in of itself or like some kind of audio play in that format. Have you ever been offered that?
Well, I do voiceover work as
Okay.
the acting working actor. I also have been interviewed by a couple podcasts. One of them was Tony Dean, Calling History. I don't know if you've heard of him or not, but that's
think so.
basically doing a portrayal with no video, just audio.
Mm.
You need to look him up. But I did the Unsinkable Molly Brown, 2 2-hour episodes, and two as episodes 1 hour long as Mary Lincoln. So, yeah, I have
Wow.
fun. Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. And
And the Chronicles of the American Civil War. I also did Mary Lincoln portrayal for them. That was a podcast. I failed to mention, I also connected with the Lincoln Symposium down at Ford's Theater a couple weeks
mm,
ago. Harold Holzer was there and a few other people you may have recognized.
mm,
The authors of quite a few books, they were there, uh, books that have just recently come out about Lincoln. So that's a great place to go.
absolutely 100%. And I love talking with people about history as well as learning about other avenues for history, which I've showed or I've discussed with a lot of people on this channel. In the sense that as historians, we've always been taught that there's always like two paths for historians, whether we go down the academic path or the federal path. And not that there's anything wrong with those, but not a lot of times people want to be teachers, and some people do not want to work at some form of government job, whether that's working in museums or some sort of institution. And sometimes there's a middle path that we have to create our careers from, which is sometimes not an easy thing to do. So JoAnn, I'm very curious, as sort of like a second to last question, or rather the ultimate questions, with everything you've learned in your career, as an actor, voice artist, as well as historical stage performer, how would you help somebody who wanted to get into this industry of portraying historical figures, really help them understand that, yes, it is, a very fulfilling career, but your goals have to be realistic. And if you understand that, you're going to do phenomenally well in this industry.
Well, it's funny what you just mentioned too, because when I was in college, I went to
Mm,
Eastern Nazarene College in Quincy, Massachusetts, which is where the Adams lived, my first 2 years of college, and I've always loved history. I grew up in Fort Ashby, West Virginia, and there was a
mm.
fort from the French and Indian War right across from
Ah,
my school. I had an uncle that lived near Gettysburg, so we'd always stop at Gettysburg on the way there. So I had this love of history. I went to the head of the history department at Eastern Nazarene College, and I said, "I really enjoy history." I received the history award through my high school career, getting the highest average and all
right.
this. And I said, "I think that maybe I want to major in history." And she said, "You'll only ever work in a museum or be a teacher. Do you want to do either of those?" And I thought, "No." I didn't see myself in either of those at that
Mm,
time. And so even though that I never didn't major in history because of that conversation, I've still always had that love of history in me, and I've been an actor most of my life, professionally the last about 20 years,
mm,
and it's a combination, being a historical interpreter, it's a combination of those 2 fields, history and acting, so it wasn't meant to be maybe in the usual way, so you might think, "Oh, I'm like her, I don't wanna be, work in a government job or whatever, in a museum, a teacher," but that passion will come through to you in a way that maybe you don't expect, and it's very fulfilling, I love it, of all the acting I do films, I do stage, I love this more than anything else, and then stage next, then film last. Um, that's 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 just something inside of you, like I said, to honor these women. I call my portrayals, I call amazing women of history because
mhm.
I believe these women are truly amazing and they need to be known because as you know, as someone who loves history, history is not just something on a page. It's not
No.
just something that happened a long time ago. It affects every single one of us today.
Mm,
We have fire signs, exit signs because of Frances Perkins, what she did almost 100 years ago with
right.
fire safety. She witnessed the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire.
Mm,
And then, of course, with her position as Secretary of Labor, she was able to get a lot of laws enacted. as a Frances Perkins, when I was at a high school, this was recently, and talking about how bad the Great Depression was with the unemployment
Mhm.
and just the banks failing and all, and she said, "Well, why didn't the president pass a law to change things?" So I was able to say, "We have a United States Constitution. There are 3 branches in this government, and each of them has their roles to play. And I'm sorry, but the president cannot make laws. That is not within his purveyance. It is not under his power. That is the Congress to do that. He is to make sure that the laws are kept that are in place, and then the Supreme Court to judge whether or not those laws are constitutional." So that's affecting us right now. Knowing the knowledge of what the Constitution says. So it's not gone. It's not past. It affects each and every one of us today, and we need to know, we need to study, we need to build on that.
And I think that is a perfect ending to this incredible historians interview, as well as just ultimate interview in general. Thank you, everyone, for joining us
You're
for this
welcome.
very
Thank you.
special interview here on the show. A huge thank you to JoAnn for making her second appearance and
You're
return to the
welcome.
show. Now, JoAnn, before we end, where can people find you on social media? And do you have any upcoming performances you would like to share with our viewers?
Most of my performances are private groups. So I'm
Mm,
always looking for new ones, like in schools or retirement
okay.
communities or things like that. The museums and libraries are open to the public. I have one coming up in Tiltonsville, Ohio. Oh, I forget the date. It's around Labor Day because of
Mm.
they're having me do Frances Perkins. Um, I don't have too many I had a whole bunch of them I just got through. I had 3 in one day of Nellie Bly at a school. That was hard, but my Facebook page is JoAnn F. Peterson, actor, singer, and Amazing Women of History Portrayals. So that's JoAnn F. Peterson, and I use my middle initial, Frances. JoAnn F. Peterson, actor, singer, and Amazing Women of History on Facebook. And then my website is JoAnnPeterson.com. So not with the F, JoAnnPeterson.com. So those are ways that you can get hold of me too.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. And if you want to hear JoAnn's first interview during the Encore years, I will also link that down below in the description of this video. So again, everyone, thank you for joining us for another amazing, incredible interview here on the show. A huge thank you to my dear friend JoAnn for coming back and telling us all about her work and what she has done thus far since we last had her on the show. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe down below. And until next time, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you all in the next video.